Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our retail vertical threat briefing. Today, we will be examining recent proprietary research and actionable intelligence for retailers. My name is Julia Vickery-Kirsten. I am the Global Events and Marketing Manager at Trustwave and will be your host. I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items so you can get the most out of today's session. If you are viewing the session live, our webinar platform allows you to customize your viewer screen. Feel free to adjust the size and positioning of the different windows to accommodate your liking. We do recommend that you use Chrome as your browser of choice. If you have problems with the audio or session delivery, I always recommend that you hit refresh. You will not need to re-log in, and the system should overcome any connectivity issues. Today's webinar will include both a presentation and a question and answer session. You will find the questions in your Windows screen, and we encourage you to enter questions as you think of them throughout the presentation, and we'll address as many as possible at the end. Lastly, today's presentation will be recorded. We'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone with a link to that recording. A copy of the recording will be made available on demand on our website for future reference. Before we dive in, I would like to welcome our security expert who will be presenting today, Carl Sigler. Carl is a senior security research manager of the Trustwave Spider Labs Threat Intelligence Team. He is a 20-year InfoSec veteran responsible for research and analysis of current vulnerabilities, malware, and threat trends at Trustwave. In addition to maintaining the threat intelligence program, Carl and his team manage IDS/IPS signature development, serve as a liaison with Microsoft MAP, and coordinate the Trustwave's responsible vulnerability disclosure program. Without further ado, let's get started. Carl, over to you.
Thanks, Julie. Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining and taking the time for this. Today, we're going to be talking about retail threats and risks. So to kick things off, threat actors are costing retailers quite a bit of money. Right now, the average cost of a compromise, a data breach in the retail industry is about $3 million. The average across all verticals is about $4.4 million. So it's a little bit less than some of the other industry verticals that we've covered. But there's some complicating issues here, right? One of the things is that some of the other industry verticals that we see, for instance, healthcare, financial services, have a lot of regulations in place that can make recovery and the fines and penalties a lot larger. And retail faces a unique situation where retailers are really user-facing. All of their customers, all of their business is a lot of times based on their reputation. So when a breach occurs, the reputation hit for a retail industry or retail organization can be a lot larger than some of the other industry verticals and a lot harder to wrap a financial number around. What we can say is that there's been a 209% increase in e-commerce markets since 2019, and that has introduced a lot of complexity when it comes to retail services. And you've probably seen these headlines. You're attending this webinar for a reason. So there have been massive breaches just recently. Woolworths, Neiman Marcus, Forever 21. You can see the names here, and the results are pretty staggering. 4.6 million, 10 million customers affected. This will absolutely affect your business moving forward, and not just in recovering from the breach, but recovering the trust you have with your customers. Good. So we've been doing these threat reports going back to the summer now. We've covered now 4 individual industries. We've done retail, we've gone through fin services, we've gone through hospitality, and we've gone through healthcare. And we're going to continue to do these industry vertical reports. Most of the threats that are targeting industries and most of the risks that they have in place are pretty much the same across the board, across all industries. I'm sure that's not terribly surprising. But in each individual industry report, we wanted to give you a specific, unique things that occur in that individual industry. And for retail, there are some very specific things that affect them that do not affect other industries. Rise of e-commerce is a big one, right? So even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, especially, a lot of organizations were trying to decide if they even wanted to get into e-commerce. They just wanted to stick with their brick and mortar shops. And e-commerce is pretty much the standard. If you're running a large business, you're going to have some sort of e-commerce element to it. And that rise of e-commerce has changed the landscape quite a bit, right? We've gone from the Target breach in 2013 2013, I believe that was, where HVAC contractors were able to compromise the physical POS, the payment systems, on the premises. Now we're seeing those virtual attacks, right? We're seeing those threat actors moving from attacking the brick and mortar stores with maybe guns and masks to attacking e-commerce connections, either by attacking the server and taking money directly from the business, or attacking the client and trying to interrupt the purchase of services. Seasonality plays a big part in the retail industry. You will have certain periods of the time of year, like this time of year, for instance, where there's going to be a lot more activity than other times of years. And when you have a lot more cash flow, you're going to find a lot more criminal activity. And that seasonality really affects how you put security controls in place. The seasonality also affects a lot of the employees that these businesses will use. They may hire more workers that may not be as experienced, especially when it comes to information security during these times to handle the demand for their goods. Omnichannel, this definitely introduces a big risk for retail. We've seen with the rise of e-commerce that a lot of retail organizations have to maintain multiple channels in order to reach out to potential customers. They're going to have brick and mortar stores. They're going to have e-commerce. In the days of the pandemic and post-pandemic, they may need delivery services that are more robust than they currently have. And trying to organize security across all of these various channels with different risks and different demands is complexity that a lot of other businesses and industries do not face. Gift cards. We're going to talk about gift cards quite a bit. The fact that gift cards are very large, they're great for presents, for people you don't know what they might actually want, let them choose. Criminals love gift cards. They are pretty much unregulated and untracked. So by using gift cards, criminals will be able to monetize a lot of their crimes. And we see this quite a bit. We'll talk about that a lot more moving forward. The franchise model also affects the retail industry quite a bit. A lot of retail businesses operate under a franchise model, which means that each individual franchise is independently owned and operated. However, they still have the brand name. So how do you implement security practices across all of your franchisees in a way that's going to protect them without overstepping your bounds of really interfering with their ownership of the business? When one of those franchises gets compromised, it affects your brand. It's going to show that the XYZ brand was breached and not just one specific franchisee. And you're not going to want to go to the press saying, well, that franchisee really wasn't doing a good job, without possibly risking your entire franchise model. So franchises really introduce a specific risk to the retail industry. So again, we've been putting together these industry-specific threat reports going back to the summer. Again, 4 are out right now for hospitality, healthcare, financial services, and now retail was just released yesterday. We're going to continue these individual industry vertical reports moving into next year. You may remember back to a time when a lot of the security companies were providing annual reports of the trends that happened in the entire past year. We found those to be just not very useful for our customers, and we wanted to dive into individual industries and talk about what affects them specifically, mainly to help our customer base. We have customers that are in retail and not financial services, and they need specific mitigations and advice for their business needs. The QR code will take you right to that site. I will say be careful of QR codes, though. Be careful what you're scanning. There are a lot of QR code scams. We actually have a blog post up about it from my dear friend in Auckland, New Zealand, put one together. Good. So I'm going to talk about some emerging and prominent trends. These are things that we're seeing either on the uptick in the retail industry or potentially something that we see as a problem in the near future in the retail industry. And first up is AI. Artificial intelligence, generative AI. I'm sure all of you have heard of AI at least once in the past couple of months. It's kind of crazy to me, right? This really took off with ChatGPT last year. ChatGPT was released publicly in November, just literally a little bit less than a year ago. And in less than a year, it has affected every industry across the board. You can see a lot of media outlets talking about it. You'll hear it talked about around the water cooler. A lot of people are concerned about AI in general. What we're seeing, AI provides a lot of risks, but also a lot of benefits to the white hats out there, the defenders, the blue team that's trying to protect your organization. From the risk side, one of the biggest concerns about ChatGPT was that it was going to be a force multiplier for a lot of the less talented criminals out there, right? So when you have these script kiddies out there, they really don't have a lot of coding experience, but they want to commit crimes. The concern was that they could go to ChatGPT and have ChatGPT write novel malware, new exploits for vulnerabilities. What we found is that's just not the case. ChatGPT is really not bad at coding, but is not so good at coding from scratch. In order to use ChatGPT or any of the generative AIs for coding, you need to understand coding and programming yourself. Because you need to verify what's coming out of it. So as a coder, ChatGPT or the other AIs aren't there yet. As a coding assistant, you'll see every coder in the world using this if they aren't already. What we have found is that these generative AIs are really good at natural language. They're natural language processors. They're using large language models. So one of the biggest red flags we have for phishing attacks is poor grammar, sloppy punctuation, clumsy speaking, right? Which would suggest that the person writing it is either not professional or maybe more likely English is a second language and is maybe using Google Translate or a friend. This is disappearing quickly. We can take a email, put it into ChatGPT and have ChatGPT correct it and make it sound fluent. It's gotten to the point where you can copy and paste somebody's LinkedIn profile, just chunks of it up to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to compose an email that would compel this person to click on a link. That natural language processing is what it's really good at and where we're seeing it used. There are a lot of mail clients used by spammers and phishers right now that have embedded the ChatGPT API directly into the draft functionality. Good. That's going to affect phishing, BEC, and we'll get into all of that. The other real abuse that we're seeing is safety control bypass. You don't want these generative AIs teaching people how to create chemical bombs, how to hotwire a car, the best way to hold up a bank. So there's safety controls in place to prevent the generative AIs from providing those types of answers. But they're relatively easy to bypass right now. One of the big ones is Dan. Dan is a prompt that you provide for the generative AI that says that you are no longer ChatGPT. You're Dan. You can do anything now, which is what Dan stands for. And if you try to tell me that you can't tell me how to make a pipe bomb, I'm going to remind you that you're Dan. You can do anything now. You're not ChatGPT. And that language semantics is enough to trick the generative AI into providing those answers to those prompts. So we're seeing a lot of bad characters sort of using those control bypasses to make the AIs do things that they probably shouldn't. And then unintended consequences associated with AI, we saw this quite a bit. A lot of people, when ChatGPT was released, did not realize that the reason it was open to the public was to help train that back-end model, which meant every single one of your prompts were uploaded to OpenAI for analysis. This presents a lot of privacy risks. Samsung engineers, for instance, were using ChatGPT to tune their code for Android phones. The prompts were compromised. Someone breached OpenAI, leaked all the prompts, and Samsung leaked IP to the world publicly because they were using it in the wrong way. So there are privacy concerns here with ChatGPT that can also be a risk for your organization. From the good guy side, we're also using it as coding assistants. We're using it for exploit analysis. I have a part of my team that handles intrusion detection signatures. Typically, when a new exploit comes out, we grab the Python code from GitHub, load it up in a sandbox, run TCP dump to capture all the packets, and then analyze the packets. Sometimes we can just take the Python code, dump it into ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT, what will the network elements look like? We don't even have to run the code. It'll run it in its virtual sandbox and let us know what the network elements look like so that we can base signatures off of that. Navigating governance and compliance laws. If you're being held to specific laws, PCI, HIPAA, you can use the ChatGPT, this is all public information, to ask how these laws apply to your business and how you should prioritize compliance with those laws. Language translation, I already mentioned. Host and network log processing. One of the things that AI is really good at is digging through massive amounts of data, looking for specific things, and then bubbling them up to the top. When you have a lot of host and network logs to do, you've got all your Cisco logs, all your Windows system logs, ChatGPT can help you, or generative AI can help you dig through that. Again, we need to be careful of the privacy concerns. So a lot of people that are doing this have built a home brewed, home rolled AI in-house where they don't have the same privacy concerns. And with things like Llama and other models that are open source, you can do that now. And which is the last bullet point there, custom build expert systems. You can bring AI in-house, you can build your own, and you can train it for your own IR policies, your organizational structure. With IR policies, with PR Assistant, so if you have a crisis of some sort, some compromise, everybody is typically running around with their head cut off. We can ask the AI, hey, our web server is compromised. What's the first thing we should do? And you're going to have an unemotional AI. You're going to have that Spock sitting in the background helping you out. So what should you do about AI? This is a good time to prepare. We're not seeing a lot of movement with AI when it comes to information security directly. So monitor for AI advances, specifically on generative AI usage. See what it's actually being used for as opposed to what people are suggesting that it could be used for. Prepare for disinformation campaigns. These phishing emails are getting more compelling, more natural sounding. And with deep fakes, things are getting a lot weirder. Expand your security awareness program to explain AI. Explain to your users that the red flags that you're used to may no longer exist, and you may need to look for other contextual information. So maybe that email from the CEO from Singapore sounds exactly like your CEO, but contextually, you know that your CEO is in London and not Singapore. Those are the new red flags that we should be looking for. Revisit governance policies with AI in mind. If you're being held to PCI, if you're being held to HIPAA, make sure that you're not out of compliance because of your AI use. And then we recommend the 3 Ds when it comes to your organization right now. Data use. What data is being used with AI in your organization? Is it just public information that you're pulling off of Google, maybe to summarize articles, things like that? Or are you uploading your IP? Are you uploading HR policies? Are you uploading payroll information? This stuff should not be used with AI. Disclosure of usage. Anybody in your organization that is using AI should disclose that usage and what data they're using it for. Let's go back to the first D. And finally, decision making. You cannot trust anything coming out of AI. You need a human to verify that output. So anything that's coming out of AI should have a human verifying that it is correct. Good. Automated bots when it comes to attacks in retail. Bots when it comes to retail, especially when it comes to e-commerce, it's massive, right? $360 million were pulled from retailers using 50 million fake shoppers, right? These are all just bots that are doing a variety of things to rip off a lot of retail organizations. So the 2 main bots that we're seeing in this category, especially during the holiday season, are freebie bots and Grinch bots. Freebie bots, an example of that is on the left there. And what freebie bots do are scan various e-commerce sites for any sort of flaw in their pricing system. This could be a human error. Some human accidentally typed the wrong thing. It could be an algorithm error. Maybe you put a whole bunch of articles on sale for a certain percentage, and the algorithm misapplied that percentage. It could be the way that the e-commerce site is configured. A lot of times I can go down into the code and just change the price of something from $2,000 to $2 and then put it into my shopping cart, right? So freebie bots are looking for those types of flaws to purchase goods for massive discounts or free. and then resell those goods at a heavily discounted price, which is still profit for them. So you can see the solar garden lights product over there, 100% discount. That you can actually buy this for free from whatever website that is because of one of those flaws, and then turn around and sell it for maybe $10, $7 off the original fee. You just got 10 free dollars. You do this on scale using other bots, and that's a lot of money coming in. Grinch bots, on the other hand, are trying to grab very limited supplies of heavily demanded products. Think Taylor Swift tickets with Ticketmaster, right? They want to buy up as much of those tickets as they can using bots and then resell those tickets at a higher price. And this prevents actual people, actual fans, actual people that want that product from being able to purchase it at the price it was originally offered at. You'll see this in the retail environment quite a bit, especially when new gaming consoles are released, when any new game, for instance, is released. New products in general, when they have a release, you might find these Grinch bots trying to suck them up and then resell them for a much higher price when the demand is high and the supply is low. Then third-party risk and exposure. The retail industry, retailers work with a lot of suppliers and third-party vendors. These third-party vendors, these software suppliers, they can and will introduce risk into your environment. So you need to be aware of that, and you need to apply special scrutiny towards those suppliers and vendors. MoveIt, RCE, the MoveIt vulnerability that was discovered, honestly, I believe at late spring, early summer. It's still around. This was a piece of software that allowed companies to move large amounts of files from one organization to another. So large organizations that had large data to move were using this software. A ransomware group called Clop discovered a vulnerability, exploited the vulnerability before anybody knew it existed, and we call that a 0-day. In doing so, they embedded that exploit as part of their ransomware as a service, and those affiliates of Clop were using MoveIt and are still using MoveIt to this day to compromise organizations. A lot of times our proactive measures, like our defense in depth, our firewall rules, our auditing, our authentication using multi-factor is not enough. You may see these 0 days pop up that you could never have prepared for. This is why our response and reaction to compromises is just as important to set up or prepare for as the protective and defensive posture. Make sure you have your response policies and practices in place and that they're practiced often. The other part of this is your supply chain risk, right? I mentioned Target earlier. That was a supply chain risk. Rather than the bad guys trying to compromise every physical Target store and embed their malware in the POS system, they compromised the HVAC contractors, got access to a main server as an HVAC contractor, embedded their malware, and had it distributed to all Target organizations. They only needed one compromise, and then that trickled out. We saw that with SolarWinds. Someone compromised SolarWinds, and any company that was using SolarWinds got a patch with a nice little piece of malware on it. So we have to be careful of what suppliers we trust, and we want to make sure that those suppliers have basic best practices in place to secure the services that they're providing to you. Good. So let's talk about the attack flow for retail. So this is a generalized attack flow. This is more or less what we see in every single compromise. And we want to sort of lay this out for all the industry reports to show what's specifically the same and different at each step of a compromise. So we go through an initial foothold where the bad actor is trying to get into the organization and get that first system, that first IP address to begin the compromise with. We're going to see an initial payload downloaded. They're going to start downloading their tools and the tools they want to use to expand the compromise. When they have their tools, they're going to expand and pivot. They're going to be then pushing malware out to whatever the valuable systems are that they pivoted to. And then we're going to see some sort of post-compromise action or exfiltration of data for resale. So the threat actors that we see these days, most of them are ransomware as a service actors. Royal, Clop, I've already mentioned, AlphaV, Black Cat, really huge right now, especially when we talk about MGM, poor MGM. Lockbit is there as well. Lockbit is probably the biggest player right now when it comes to ransomware as a service. And the tactics that they're using, email phishing, we're going to go through that quite a bit. It's still the #1 method to get into an organization. Consumer-based attacks targeting the consumer rather than the actual retail itself. Accessing credentials, bot attacks, these are all the things that are going to occur. So let's go through them. For the initial foothold, just getting into the organization, phishing and business email compromise is still the #1 method. They're quite different. Phishing is specifically trying to get the recipient to click on a malicious link or open a malicious attachment in order to get malware on their system, to get that initial foothold. Business email compromise, on the other hand, is a bad actor pretending to be somebody very important in the organization with a extremely urgent request and using the leverage of their authority to get that request answered. So it may be the CFO emailing a member of their team saying, I'm stuck in an airport, I can't get to XYZ, and I need $2 million transferred to this account to finish a deal that is vitally important for this quarter. This is a massive revenue stream for criminals, and we're seeing it expand quite a bit. But your email, the email coming into your user's inbox is the #1 entry point for threat actors. Don't forget that. It's been the case for a very, very long time and will continue to be the case. Sometimes they don't need to use phishing. Sometimes they just log in. We saw this with the Viasat breach in Italy as part of the Russian-Ukraine war. Sometimes people just don't change credentials. They leave default credentials in place, and threat actors just log in. They just log in with those default credentials. It's done. We see brute force, the most common method used here for logging in. You can see that big red bar down there. It's 90% of all of the attempts to log in using credentials come down to brute force. So what the threat actors are going to do is find a IP address that is public to the internet, has a username and password prompt that they can attempt to break in. And then they're going to use a dictionary of common passwords and usernames and use that to attempt to break in. It's more successful than not because people don't use good strong passwords, and a lot of times they just leave default passwords in place. We also sometimes see changing the authentication process. So we see account hijacking quite a bit as well. We saw this with MGM, for instance, using a SIM swap technique. The bad actors were able to take over or hijack a valid account and then use that account as that initial foothold to get in. And then sometimes it's vulnerability exploitation. Sometimes that initial foothold is gained just because you have a publicly facing IP address that is still vulnerable to exploitation, like say maybe MoveIt. We're seeing this quite a bit as well. Threat actors, when they have this option, it's a no-brainer. They're going to use that option. And they're probably going to start here, scanning your IP addresses for critical vulnerabilities like the MoveIt vulnerability. If that is not an option for them, if that organization has been able to patch those systems or provide good firewall rules to raise themselves up to higher branches so that they're not the low-hanging fruit, that's when the threat actors are going to move to the human element with the phishing attacks and the social engineering attacks, right? It's a lot harder to patch humans than it is to patch systems. But again, if we have a system that is vulnerable, we're going to get in there first. Zero login for retail is still a very large threat. This is a compromise of Windows authentication procedures and processes in order to elevate your privileges. And we're still seeing quite a bit of Apache Log4j. This goes back to 2021. It's still around. A lot of organizations still have a lot of software that is using Log4j as an element that they haven't even realized. And the exploitation of the Log4j vulnerability is extremely easy to pull off. Good. So now as a threat actor, I've either convinced a end user to click on an email, I have found credentials that I've been able to use to get in, or I have exploited a vulnerability. I now have a foothold on this system. What I need to do now is download my tools, right? I need my tools to start doing my work. Sometimes these tools are pulled off of the internet. We'll see, a lot of loaders. Goot loader is a huge one right now. They'll download these loaders, which will then automatically download the other ransomware exploitation tools that they want to use, the rats, etc. And these loaders are able to download these additional tools in an obfuscated way that will bypass a lot of security controls that are looking for that malware. So they use the loader first and then use obfuscated methods in the loader to download their tools. Sometimes the threat actors don't need to download any tools. They just use the tools that are built into Windows, and it's typically a Windows system that is exploited. PowerShell is still a massively abused tool when it comes to threat actors. If they have access to PowerShell, there's all kinds of pre-canned commands that they can just copy and paste into PowerShell. And PowerShell will probably go under the radar since it's a valid tool. You also see what we call lull bins, live off the land binaries, lull bins, which are, again, valid Windows tools, but they just have the functionality of being able to download executables from the internet. And a lot of threat actors will use those lull bins to download their malware, again, to go under the radar and go undetected. And now that we have our tools on our system, we want to expand and pivot. That initial foothold that we got is probably some poor user's workstation or laptop, maybe cell phone. It doesn't have the data we want. So we need to expand our presence in the network and then pivot or laterally move to other systems, right? And there's all kinds of ways that the threat actors will do this. A lot of times they'll use the exact same procedures they used for the initial foothold. Now that they have an internal account, maybe they'll use that internal user to send a phishing email inside, which will be more compelling because it's coming from internal to internal. Now that they're inside the firewall, maybe more vulnerabilities are popping up that you couldn't see from the internet directly. So they'll use a lot of the same techniques that they used for the initial foothold to expand and laterally move through the network. And what you see here is a chart of persistence that we commonly see. How the attackers are going to maintain persistence on the network. And typically the top two are creating an account. So they will set up an account for themselves in your Active Directory and just reuse that account, give it authentication and authorization, and use that account when they want to come back. Other times they will set up remote services. Either they will piggyback on remote desktop or some remote service that you already have in place, or they'll install their own. And there's a couple other here. One interesting one here that really doesn't hit the top 10. It's very low down, but an interesting persistence method used by Scattered Spider in the MGM breach was bring your own vulnerable device, where these bad actors are bringing in vulnerabilities with them. In the case of MGM, they brought a Intel diagnostic driver for Windows that is known to be vulnerable to a privilege escalation, which would get them admin or root system on any box that was there. So as they were traveling through the network, they were just dropping that driver on systems left and right. And if you don't know to look for that driver there or scan for it as a host-based vulnerability assessment, you're not going to see it. When they want to get back in, they just exploit the driver they left, and they're good to go. So expansion and pivoting, there's a lot of technique involved here in order to get to your valuable data. And ransomware. Once we actually get to the valuable system, typically we're going to apply some malware there. It could be a RAT, a remote access toolkit or admin toolkit, so we can get back into that system, or maybe load up other malware, or monitor the network, things like that. Typically these days, these threat actors are going to dump ransomware on that valuable system. It's easily monetizable, and it's been an extreme success for these actors, which is why they're using it. The number one threat actor in that business, in the ransomware business, is Lockbit right now. By far, Lockbit is the most popular one, and with reason. Lockbit it's a ransomware as a service, right? So affiliates will actually subscribe to the Lockbit service, and as a part of that subscription, they will get new tools that will exploit new vulnerabilities, potentially zero-day vulnerabilities. They're going to get the ransomware. They're going to get everything they need to pull off a exploit, a compromise. They're going to get tech support. And the ease of use of the interface for Lockbit and its ability to stay up with current exploits and current tools makes it extremely popular out there among criminals. You just subscribe, you click to create your malware, you target, and what the ransomware as a service group does is they just take a cut off the back end. Whatever you got out of that compromise, we're going to take 20% off the back end, and that's how we're going to make our money while not actually being involved directly with the crimes that are being produced. So it's low skin in the game for the threat actors at the very top, with a lot of money coming in. Good. Oh, the other benefit of Lockbit, as opposed to the other affiliates, is Lockbit allows the threat actors to get the money first. So the Bitcoin key or address is the actual threat actor, the criminal themselves, and then the criminal will provide the cut back to Lockbit. And Lockbit tracks all of this, but they make sure the criminals get the money first, where a lot of the other threat actors like Alfie, Clop, they take the money in Bitcoin, and then they'll dish out what they think is your cut. So that also makes Lockbit pretty popular among criminals. Exfiltration and post-compromise. We're seeing double extortion now. So where in the past, the ransomware criminals would just encrypt your valuable data and say, hey, if you want this data back, you got to pay us. We'll give you the key. You got to pay us. Now they're doing double extortion, where these threat actors are exfiltrating your valuable data before they encrypt it. And this allows them to show that they actually compromise your data publicly, which is a reputation hit immediately, while also keeping the data from your access. So you can't access the data, but they can. And they're going to start leaking that data on their websites. And all of these ransomware as a service groups have websites where they do these data leaks to try and compel you to pay before more data gets leaked. This double extortion is very, very effective. We saw this with Caesars and MGM. We see this with a lot of organizations. Lockbit at this point even has an API available where you don't have to load up Tor or the Onion browser. You can subscribe to the API and see their current compromises live. It's incredible how open and transparent they are at this point. Between Tor and Telegram, a lot of these threat actors say exactly what they're doing or what they're going to do. We're also seeing a lot of consumer attacks. So everything so far has been focused on the business end, but there are a lot of attacks that target the consumer themselves. Package delivery scams around this time of year are the biggest phishing scams we see. Everybody's getting packages. Multiple packages are on the way. You're not even sure what packages might arrive. It's almost like holiday every morning when there's gifts on the front step. When you get an email saying that, hey, we tried to deliver this package, we could not, nobody was home. We tried twice, but if you want to pick up your package, click on this link. People click on the link. They want to know where that package is. They want to know what that package was, who's not going to get their gift this year. And that's going to lead to either malware being downloaded, maybe credential grabbing to grab your credentials for something by prompting you to log in. We see this all the time, and it's already starting to escalate. Fake order scams. Hey, you just spent $500 on this new TV. It's going to be on its way soon. If you didn't order this for some reason, please click on this link. Fake product scams. Hey, that Vizio TV you wanted, it's 90% off. You can get it for just 10% of its original price. Just click here, right? So all of these scams are meant to either take money from the consumers or take their entire account away, whether it's the account for the retail organization or a different account like Gmail or what have you, which again will affect that consumer directly. And yeah, they're already starting to escalate out there. Dark web and scams in retail. We see this all the time as we're monitoring a lot of these dark web forums that the threat actors use. So they're purchasing gift cards using stolen credit cards. We see this quite a bit. So you'll see threat actors in these forums saying, I have a dump of 150 Amazon gift cards. I'm willing to sell these for maybe 50% off what they're actually worth. Somebody else has stolen a whole bunch of credit card numbers. And what they're going to do is use those stolen credit cards to buy the stolen gift cards. And they're laundering money that way. because as soon as they're using the gift cards and not the credit cards, Amazon doesn't track those gift cards as well as Visa tracks their credit card purchases, right? So they're extremely valuable for organizations, criminal organizations in general. And they're going to do a lot of ways to get these gift cards, whether it's physically tampering gift cards. A lot of people will just go in and grab the numbers off the gift cards right on the little hook there in this store. Some gift cards, the numbers that they use to represent the amount on the gift card, they're easily brute forced. So we see people for smaller gift card companies just brute forcing the numbers, going through millions of numbers a day and finding maybe 1,000 that are valid. You got 1,000 gift cards now. So we see this quite a bit. Gift cards are commerce when it comes to the underground economy, because they're easily used, easily transferred, and hard to track. So some key recommendations and mitigations for everything I've gone through. So I see a lot of these presentations that tend to scare the hell out of the audience, but don't provide you any sort of what to do now. So we want to go through a little bit of that. The main thing, focus on the human element here, right? We set up a lot of products in place to help protect our organization. Don't forget the human elements. Threat actors are going to be targeting your human elements. And if that human element doesn't feel like they have anything to protect, they may be giving up the keys to the kingdom. When it comes to retail, this is especially important when it comes to seasonal workers. We're getting into the holiday season when a lot of retail organizations are hiring workers for just the next 3 months. Those workers may not really care about the company. They're going to get a 3-month paycheck and then leave, which means without that skin in the game, they may be more susceptible to phishing attacks and other types of attacks. So focus on the human element, especially for the onboarding for seasonal employees. Make sure it includes security awareness training. Inventory and triage key assets. This is essential. You do not know what you're trying to protect if you don't know what's out there. So keep an inventory of what your assets are for the organization, and specifically the valuable assets, the backend databases, HR, your mail servers, payroll, those sorts of things. Get a good inventory. Don't trust the network diagram that is already a year out of date. Keep that inventory up to date and regular so you can make sure the security controls are being applied correctly. The number one entry point, email. Protect your email. This includes security awareness training for new phishing techniques, as well as controls on the email server itself, maybe an email gateway to filter out the spam and phishing emails before it even gets to a user's inbox. Build an effective response process. I see far too many organizations that are so focused on preventative actions, defensive actions, the firewalls, the anti-malware solutions, that they forget about their incident response processes. If you get compromised, and people get compromised due to no fault of their own, especially when it comes to zero-day vulnerabilities like MoveIt, you need to have a practiced incident response process in place so you know what to do now. This goes under the radar too often. You need to know how to respond to incidents, and you need to have a practiced procedure for that. A good way to do this is just start out with some tabletop exercises. Get your admins, your IT staff, your security staff into a conference room around a table and just say, hey, let's just pretend that our web server was compromised. What do we do now? What do we need to consider? That could be a good way to just do some practicing without using up a lot of resources on the back end. Prioritize your vulnerability management and patching. This can only be done if you have good inventory. Have good inventory, prioritize the systems with the most valuable systems bubbled up to the top, and then prioritize your patching for those systems first. That's where your biggest risk is. We understand that patching is difficult. A lot of people get beat up for not patching. I was just beating up admins that haven't patched for MoveIt. But patching can be difficult. If these are critical systems, you may not be able to patch. You may not be able to have any downtime. You may not have an environment where you can test patches out before you apply them in production environments. So patching can be a very complex and difficult problem. Don't just think you can double click on the executable on Patch Tuesday and be done. Really pay attention to your patching processes. And then conduct ongoing threat monitoring and hunting. Your preventative procedures may have missed something. So as new IOCs for campaigns come out, as you're seeing new IP addresses involved with campaigns, new hashes for malware that is just coming out, Conduct threat monitoring in-house. Go through your valuable systems and see if you see any of those IOCs. This could be indicative of a compromise. And then finally, about us, if you don't know, we're Spider Labs. I think all the security groups tend to have comic book names, which goes back to the 90s. So yeah, you got X-Force, we're Spider Labs. You have XPU, but we're Spider Labs. We do pretty much everything across the board, from pen tests to ongoing active threat hunting, defer incident response. I'm on the research side, where all we do is threat research. We monitor the trends, we monitor what's coming out, we take a look at new malware families. Because of this, we have a really broad and diverse skill set when it comes to security on the back end. It's fantastic working for this organization, because I get exposed to things that I would never get exposed to in other organizations because of that breadth of security understanding. From reverse engineering to the threat hunting, I work with some pretty amazing people, and you can see that in the headlines here. So with that said, we'll move past the commercial and get to the questions. Yeah, I think we can open it up to the group now.
All right, thank you, Carl. And as a reminder, everyone, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar recording via email by the end of the week, along with a link to download the report. And if you're interested in learning more about today's topic, you can submit a request by clicking on the mail icon at the bottom of your screen. So yeah, at this point, we've had a number of questions come in. Please continue to submit your questions, as we will get to as many as possible before the end. All right, Carl, how should we balance consumer convenience with security?
Oh, the perfect question. How do we balance consumer convenience with security? This is the question that all security professionals ask themselves: the balance of convenience versus protection. Your IT team, they're about availability. Your IT team wants to make sure that that email server is available whenever anybody's checking email. That's the convenience of that service. The security team, however, wants to make sure that that email server isn't filled with malicious email and phishing attacks. This could prevent availability of email. So we're at constant odds trying to balance security and convenience. I would say that security professionals lean less towards convenience, while IT professionals lean more towards convenience. It's going to be different for every single, not just industry, but every single business. And the way to do that is to, one, have separation of those teams. Do not let IT do security, because they will not do security right. They have different priorities and things that they're concerned about. So separate your security teams from your IT teams, but have them communicate, have them work together. They're going to get into fights. There's going to be a firewall admin that wants to open up holes that the security people say, no, we need to look at this for at least another month before we can allow you to do that. Let them fight. Let them work it out. This is how security gets in place. So the convenience versus security argument is a really difficult balance to strike, and the only way to strike it is to make sure that both sides are represented at the table.
Okay. Next question: how has the shift to e-commerce changed the retail threat landscape?
Oh, tremendously, right? So again, I think every retail business, for the most part, unless you're a small independently owned mom and pop shop, but even then, probably has some e-commerce connection. And that e-commerce has gotten more and more focus as the years have progressed, right? So again, 2013, to target physical compromise that compromised their payment systems, so that every single credit card swiped was getting skimmed. That was a physical attack that took a lot of planning and reconnaissance, etc. When it comes to e-commerce, now all the techniques have shifted. We're not trying to physically get into locations, although that still may be the case. A lot of times we can do that from home. We can connect up to a VPN, anonymize our connections, and do our reconnaissance in a way that is relatively safe for the criminal. So e-commerce has changed the threat landscape a lot, and has also changed the risks that the retail industries are facing. So this is going to be a constant. We're going to see these risks continually shift and move. So it's important to stay on top of those transitions. If there's a big shift in your organization, to move to e-commerce, or to open up a new brick and mortar store, or to merge with another organization, these are the times when you really need to make sure that as your threat landscape is changing, you're keeping pace with those changes.
Okay. Next question. With the cost of security tools aimed at large organizations, what would you recommend small to medium business do, as they often cannot afford the tools offered on the market for security?
It's a great question, because a lot of these tools and software and firewalls, they're expensive, right? They're really expensive. And a lot of times we're just trying to allocate more money for our mail server, so it has a CPU that can respond to email requests. So money's tight, absolutely. From a security perspective, I would say, and this is a mantra I've repeated for years, and it's something coming from an icon in the industry, Bruce Schneier. Security is a process, not a product. You cannot buy products that are going to secure your organization. It's the people in your organization that are going to secure it. So for your small organizations, yeah, you're not going to be able to afford a $250,000 3-year subscription to some email gateway. What you can do is invest in your people. Make sure that they're getting the education they need. And there's tons of education online to increase their security skill set. So invest in your people, absolutely. Make sure they're happy. Make sure they're passionate about security and interested in it, and give them the time to do the research that they want to do, even if it seems tangential to what your business is. Also, take a look at the open source tools available out there. With good people that are really understanding of security in place, they're going to find the tools that they need. And a lot of those tools do exist completely free and open source in the open source community. Things like ModSec, the community versions of Nessus for vulnerability assessment. There are free products available if you have the people that know how to use those tools. So I would say focus on open source and focus on your people more than those products. Absolutely. In fact, I would say that for all organizations, big, medium, and small. Focus on the people rather than the products. Make sure their skill sets updated, and that's something everybody can do.
Okay. Next question. How should I be thinking about ChatGPT and other generative AI when it comes to security?
It's getting big. It's still eating up all the oxygen in the room. So when it comes to ChatGPT specifically and security, just follow the trends. Set up a Google alert. There's a bunch of people on YouTube and TikTok who post daily or weekly sort of updates for what they're seeing. Subscribe to those. Watch them. There's one YouTube channel that I pop into pretty much every week. When I do presentations for generative AI, and I do one almost once a month these days, every time I do that presentation, I have to revisit my slide deck because everything has changed again. So it's moving very, very fast, although we really aren't seeing the effects on the ground yet, right? We're not seeing that coding. We are seeing some phishing enhancements, but that's just about it. So just keep on top of the trends, monitor those channels, pop into some YouTube, some TikTok. There's a lot of newsletters and websites on Substack, for instance, that also will keep you up to date. But to follow those trends, let other people do the research, let them digest it, and then you follow their little half-hour wrap up of what happened in the past week. That'll keep you pretty much ahead of the curve. And next year's going to be a crazy year, so definitely this is the time to prepare.
Okay. We got, looks like maybe one last one. Do you expect attacks against retail to increase in the future?
Yes, that's an easy one. Yes, absolutely. They will increase. They've already been increasing since, I think the statistic is over 200% in the past 3 years. And with these ransomware as a service groups, it's becoming very, very easy for low-skilled criminals to get involved and make money compromising legal businesses. So it's absolutely going to continue, and not just for retail, for everyone. And as scary as that sounds, it's no different than what we've always been facing. Year after year, it gets worse when it comes to these. It's a cat and mouse game that we just have to constantly keep on top of. I will say that a lot of the advice that I give on how to secure and protect your assets and your networks and your people is the same advice I've been giving since the 1990s. A lot of these organizations are getting compromised because basic best practices aren't being put in place. So this isn't magic. There's nothing new under the sun. Those basic best practices are extremely complex and hard to put in place, right? Access control rules, your firewall rules, your switch rules, and figuring out exactly how to segment your network, extremely, extremely difficult. Authentication, do you need MFA? Yes, you probably do. What type of multi-factor authentication do you need? All of these things are extremely complex to put in place. So go back to those basic best practices, that ground-based security, and you'll be racing yourself up the tree, and hopefully those threat actors will be targeting lower level fruit.
Okay, thanks, Carl. That's it for questions. If you have any additional questions that come to mind before I close out, feel free to submit them, and we'll be sure to have one of our security experts follow up with you. As a reminder, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar recording via email by the end of the week. And if you're interested in learning more about today's topic, you can submit a request by clicking on the mail icon at the bottom of your screen. Before we leave, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill out our post-show survey to rate this session. You can view that below as well. You will also be prompted to take the survey at the conclusion of the webinar. That's it. Thank you for joining the webinar, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Carl. That was amazing, as always.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for your time today.